Jimmy will never have stood for this, and neither will I!
The Darkness. I had played and finished the game's sequel, The Darkness 2, because that game is on Steam, whereas The Darkness 1 is exclusive to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. I had heard how the sequel was made by a different developer entirely, and how its tone and style was changed to be more cartoony than the first game. I had a decent time with the sequel, but after a long time I finally got the opportunity to get the original The Darkness on Xbox 360. The game starts off in a car chase where you're working with the Mafia. Some deal goes bad and you lose the money you were supposed to give to your Uncle Paulie. Then, basically the whole game is this series of events surrounding this guy being pissed off at you and wanting you dead. The premise may seem simple, a run-of-the-mill Mafia story, but no. The character you play as, Jackie, isn't just some typical Italian mobster. He's this brooding, edgy, long-haired, gothic, metalhead, cynical type. So it's this bizarre contrast of being surrounded by Goodfellas-type characters and dialogue, but then the main character is so out of place, but also somehow a part of their family and operation. It's like, imagine a punk rocker mohawk guy hanging out with the Sopranos. It's two different worlds. But here, it only serves to make the plot and game that much more interesting and strange. Very soon into the game, I was just really impressed with the graphics. It's a 2007 game, for fuck's sakes. It looks better than modern games like Starfield. Graphics really have not improved much since 2007, it seems. Diminishing returns. The models for the characters' faces, the lighting, the physics system, and the attention to details like your hair and coat having physics, seeing yourself in the mirror and being able to look down your legs and feet, or the way your guns clash up against the walls automatically when you get too close, and how the arm animations change depending on what angles you're looking at. The game overall just has this really professional polish to it that really makes it feel ahead of its time. The animations and weight of the bullet impacts are great too. Shooting enemies, they react dramatically, flailing around to the ground, almost reminds me of the physics in GTA 4. The gameplay here is a pseudo open-world single-player shooter campaign, but it has a lot of oddities in its design. For the first couple hours, it takes a while to wrap your head around what the game expects from you navigation-wise. There are no objective markers, or much in the way of helpful navigation. You press the select button to pull up your inventory, and it will give you some hints of what it expects you to do in the form of a few lines of text, but it isn't always clear where the location wants you to go. This got me quite frustrated in the beginning, as I began walking around in circles over and over, having no idea what to do, feeling annoyed, which is made worse by the game's extremely slow movement speed. Eventually, however, I realized the game's subway system is the main hub, and even more, there are these helpful navigation stations inside the subway that will give you directions of places you want to go, like real life memorizing the street names and stuff. But I feel the game could have done a better job pointing these out to the player. Maybe make one of the missions to go to one of these as a tutorial or something, because it's really easy to miss them and spend a lot of time scratching your head left clueless. Frequently the game will be vague about what it wants you to do, or where you're supposed to go to talk to someone, when really all you have to do is find a phone and call some guy. I do appreciate how immersive the game tries to be, and how grounded everything is, like having to navigate yourself using maps and directions and using phones. The game at times feels like it takes inspiration from RPG games like Oblivion, which was famous at the time, because of how many NPCs you talk to, and how you can choose what dialogue you want to say to them. Also, the music in these subway stations starts playing some calm, mystical theme that sounds like something out of Oblivion, which I thought was funny. At first, the combat is simple. You have two pistols, each can shoot with the right or left triggers, and you go through relatively linear street, city type levels killing enemies, though the difficulty is still fairly challenging. It has easy, medium, and hard. I picked medium. Even on medium difficulty, you can die very quickly if you don't know what you're doing. And once again, I feel like the game could have explained the mechanics better, because it took a few hours to realize that there is an entire mechanic where if you stand in lighter areas, you have less health. Eventually I realized that in the main menu there is a darkness tab, where you can read all the different mechanics, and it explains as such. So then a lot of the game is about shooting out lights and lamps, and trying to stay inside the darkness as it increases your shield. The controls can be weird to learn too, because sometimes if you're standing in the light too much and you press the darkness button, the monsters will just refuse to come out and make a sort of sizzle noise, something I couldn't understand what was happening until many hours into the game when I realized what was going on. Still, the visual indicators for these things are a bit vague, and it's hard to know exactly how much health you have or how much the darkness adds to your shield. But when standing in very well lit areas, it's not uncommon to die in 2 shots. However, standing in darker areas, you can take a lot more bullets. I learned that the hard way, and died quite a few times before realizing. The game could definitely explain its mechanics better or slowly teach them to you with objectives, but sadly it doesn't. Eventually you start getting a large arsenal of weapons, shotguns, assault rifles, Uzis, tons of different dual-wield pistols. Much of the game does center around dual wielding, but when you get shotguns and assault rifles, you use both of your hands. Another point in favor of the impressive graphics and attention to detail is, when you slightly hold down the trigger, you can see your fingers slightly moving to pull the trigger, and it only shoots when you push far enough. Can't say I've ever seen another game do that. It's a very nice touch. You can spawn these little goblin demon guys at various fixed points around the maps to help you do things. Usually it's stuff like needing them to unlock gates or doors that also help you in combat, like being a chain gun wielding machine gunner, a melee guy, or a bomber and one that kills lights. They didn't seem like totally fleshed out, but it was a neat little additional mechanic to play with. Where the game really shines is with its narrative, its atmosphere and story. Every time you enter a loading screen or change areas, you get this scripted cutscene of the protagonist standing in a black area just talking to himself or commenting on what's going on. Sometimes it's picked from a random pool of things, but other times it's guaranteed to get a certain context-specific cutscene. The writing is very entertaining. At times it's almost juvenile, as if it was written by a bunch of edgy 13-year-old high schoolers, like constantly saying the word darkness, calling everything dark, dark, dark. It's dark, it's so dark, it's darker than dark. It's the darkest around. The darkness inside me. Pitch black darkness, super duper dark. Like, yeah, it gets pretty silly sometimes, but it has that endearing, campy vibe to it that makes me appreciate it more. It's just entertaining. Especially the whole mafia plot, and everyone around you talking in that mobster accent, while the main character is responding to them in a completely different tone.
Holy mother of pearl, Jack! Everyone thought you was dead! We heard you flamed out the same time as that cocksucker Eddie Schroet. That's one hell of a stunt you pulled. Where you been hiding?
I spent a couple of weeks in a dark place. You wouldn't understand.
You meet all sorts of interesting characters, and there's even lots of NPCs roaming around the subway that will talk to you if you stand in front of them. Sometimes they even give you side quests to complete, and I did a fair good amount of them, though it wasn't obvious what completing the side quests unlocked, besides maybe some extra content, like concept artworks. It was still fun to see what all the different characters had to offer. Like that one mini quest where the old lady throws some coins on the railroad tracks and asks you to see if you can get them back before getting killed.
Care to make a little wager? Just between friends?
What you got in mind?
See this coin? Let's say I throw it down the track and you go pick it up before the train gets you.
Of course, the game centers around the darkness, which is like this evil entity that resides within you, almost enslaving you to do its bidding. It makes the game feel like this schizophrenic nightmare, where the voices in your head are lying to you or misleading you, but your character is also just sane enough to recognize it. So the game is constantly fucking with you, saying things like, "Wrong way, Jackie," or "Don't do that." But it's what you're supposed to do, making it this interesting dilemma like, do I trust the voices in my head, or are they messing with me? The darkness gives you special powers, though once again the mechanics for them aren't made very clear. You press a button to bring out these snake demons from your sides, and they help to illuminate the environment and highlight different objects and enemies. They also have special abilities that you slowly unlock, but sadly I never found most of them all that useful. Usually they are mandatory for progression, but other than that they don't really add to the gameplay. At first you have this crawling snake ability used to crawl through some specific vents to unlock doors. Then you get this tentacle arm that has a whip or a grabbing move you need to use to move objects to progress. Then you unlock darkness guns, which are these guns with infinite ammo, but only when you're sufficiently standing in dark areas or something like that. Once again, I didn't really realize for a long time. Lastly, you get this black hole ability that I guess seemed cool at first, but I never ended up using it that much. Additionally, each enemy you kill, you can walk up to and press A to devour their hearts. Now, it's not clear exactly what this does either. When you consume every so many, it says darkness powers upgraded. But again, I never really knew what that did either. A lot of the mechanics are sort of nebulous and left myself wondering what the hell anything does, even still halfway into the game. Still, it was satisfying as the animations and general level of polish on everything is fun to engage with. The game puts you through a wide variety of intense and often disturbing scenarios. One moment you're relaxing in Jenny's apartment, Then the next you're caught in this surreal, war-torn vision of World War I, surrounded by faceless soldiers in trenches. The tone can get very heavy. There are scenes depicting self-harm and psychological trauma, including one area nicknamed the Suicide Corner. The game doesn't hold back from showing you the horrors of war or urban combat. There are wounded soldiers crying for help, and later you'll find yourself navigating drug dens, taking down gang members, or sneaking onto ships for violent showdowns. Despite the bleak tone, the game's pacing is strong, and the quieter moments like wandering around subway stations, checking maps, or calling optional numbers from payphones are surprisingly welcome. Because using these payphones, you can unlock silly optional collectible dialogues, which was always amusing.
Hey, I'm Roger's friend. Roger's answering machine is currently on vacation, so if you want to leave a message for it, leave it to me, and I'll make sure he gets it so he can in turn give it to Roger.
Man, that was lame.
Oh, that was funny, man.
I need help. I can't stop drinking. You know, I'm drunken. Drinking. Drink. Maybe a fucking truckload full of vodka. I think I'm dying. Please help me.
The narrative is engaging enough where it keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. At first, you were just trying to avoid getting killed by this mob boss, Paulie, but then you watch him murder your girlfriend right in front of your eyes, and then you're on this hell-bent rampage to get back at him. When you finally do, the game ends, and it wraps up nicely. The atmosphere is immersive the whole time. The whole thing has this aura of a metalhead school kid about it. There are TVs around the world you can turn on and watch random stations, some of them blasting death metal. The soundtrack is a mix of metal and ambient stuff. The only place where the game's a bit rough around the edges is, I would say, some of the direction and objectives. There are some places where the only way to progress is really cryptic and obscure, like this one part where you get locked off in a place with exploding bombs all around you, and it turns out that you have to shoot this lock on a gate in some pitch black corner. That part really pissed me off and took a while to learn. The path ahead isn't always obvious, and it can make for some tedious or frustrating moments. Also, like I said previously, the mechanics could have been explained better through either some short tutorials or have some missions introduce them to you, but the game just kind of throws them at you with no introduction. I have some faint memories of this game's sequel, The Darkness 2, but I've seen a lot of people say it got a lot of things wrong. The tone was just way off. The first game is much more grim and mature, but also has a great, entertaining, cheesy, campy vibe to it. I mostly had a blast playing through this, and especially have lots of praise for the presentation, the overall graphics, physics, and fun, impactful combat, and even the enemy AI was really impressive. I also liked how the whole game you're just fighting humans, believe it or not. Usually when games put in these dark fantasy elements, you start fighting goblins and monsters and all sorts of stuff, but it's a nice change of pace for once, for you to be the weird demon-possessed guy while still fighting all these ordinary people. 8 out of 10.
I know. You have to wake up now.